Welcome, everybody, so far to military intelligence and intelligence analysis and ontology engineering, the course that you have all reluctantly signed up for and are now locked into because the drop ad period has passed. So, welcome again. Since it's been a few weeks since we've met, I thought I'd cover a little old material to refresh your memories and also intersplice that with a little new material, in particular definitions and how to construct them and why. So, as you recall, definitions, some of the bread and butter of the ontology engineering practices that we deploy, we have a term and an expression defining that term. So a definition in our context is pair with the term and the expression. And then for any definition in any domain, the term is true in that domain, just in case the expression is. Triangle being our anchor example. You're not going to get a case in which you have a triangle that's not a polygon with 3 edges and 3 vertices. And similarly, you're not going to get a case of a polygon with 3 edges and 3 vertices. That's not a triangle. This links right into how we evaluate such definitions. We look at the term, see when it's true, we assume it's true, and then see if we can come up with an example when the expression is not true under that condition. Similarly, to go in the other direction, we look at the scenario in which there is, in this case, a polygon with 3 edges and 3 vertices, and we try to imagine a scenario in which that thing is not a triangle. So it goes back and forth, back and forth. Now, of course, this is a bad definition. It's easy for us to identify that. It's easy to come up with counterexamples, as Diogenes did when he held up a plucked chicken. Counterexample. All right, that's old hat. Some new stuff. Primitive definitions. As I've said a few times, every theory has its primitives. We have to start somewhere. If you're going to play the game, there's some things you need to start with. Sometimes we just cannot define in any way but circularly terms that we need to use in our ontology or in our just our theories in general. And so these are what we call primitive definitions. For example, continuate part of in basic form ontology is a relation that's so basic, any attempt to define it in terms of other terms will just invariably require referencing parthood, either directly or indirectly. So try, you will fail. Some things are just rock bottom. Entity is another example. Entity in BFO is so basic, it resists definition in terms of anything other than like entities. Entity is everything, right? Like it's all the particulars. How are you going to define that without talking about the entities directly or indirectly? Not peculiar to BFO. All theories, as I said, have their primitives. You see this when you talk to like physicists, for instance, you press them, what are the boson? Asking the hard questions. At some point, they tell you to get out of my office or how did you get in my house? They ask questions like that because they want to play the game. So they have rough and ready definitions, but for all intents and purposes, for their relative tasks that they have set out before them, they are assuming they understand well enough what these things are, these terms are, what their definitions are, circular or not, so that they can go do their theorizing and build their theories and whatnot. Of course, we go in often and we like poke the bears and try to figure out, can I define that in terms of other things, something else in the theory or some other theory? Can I bring these together in a more holistic environment, more expressive holistic environment? And sometimes we're good at that and we can do that, sometimes we can't. But at some point, even we have to stop and say, there's nothing I can say more that's not circular. And so these are our primitives. It's okay to have those. Every theory has them. We are every theory. We don't want, in general, if we can get away with it, definitions to be circular, though. Now, we often distinguish definitions from things that are elucidated, terms that are elucidated. So primitives are elucidated. We give examples, we give like gestures at them, but we're not in that territory. If we're talking about definitions that are relating or being characterized in terms of other things that are themselves perhaps primitive, we don't want them to be circular. So we try to avoid circularity. What's this? Here's an example, and these are actual examples straight out of ontology of the BFO ecosystem. Bad practices, and we want to get away from. So here's a circular example from the ontology of biomedical investigation. Training objective. A training objective which is fulfilled by the provisions of some training. That's not a good definition. Here's another characterization. Maybe an objective which is fulfilled by the provision of some training. As a training objective. Better or worse. The first one is circular, obviously, right? How about this one? Large. This is from not from an ontology proper, but from the salty cat. So the attribute of something that is big. Cool. Bad definition. Large. The attribute something has when it's measurable quality that is above an average. This is adapted from WordNet. Now, I'm not here as testing to the goodness in other circumstances or other contexts of these two definitions, but I am pointing out some of the ones with the X's beside them are circular and the ones with the checks are not. We want to avoid circular. So if what I'm saying, like the through line here is not clear. So we have like conditions under which we want to evaluate definitions, term, expression, right? When the term's true, the expression's true. That's like our basic litmus test for definition. They're not all definitions that fit that pattern are good definitions. There are additional constraints we want to add. One of them is don't make that circular definitions if you can get away with it. If you make a circular definition, the term is going to be true, very likely, when the expression is true, or it's easy to construct such things, which would make sense because it's circular. All right, if I gave you a definition that said God equals God, necessary and sufficient condition. When the term is true, the thing combining is true, and you're never going to come apart, doesn't mean that it's a good definition. So additional constraints on top of this kind of basic evaluation, that's what we're looking at. Here's another fear, the state of being fearful. Not great. Or an emotion experienced in the anticipation of some specific pain or danger. There's word name. All right. Better. There are also loops that you can look out for. These are somewhat insidious circularities. So definitional loop arises when, for example, the textual definition for a term refers to another term, which has a textual definition referring to the first. So training objective, a training objective, which is fulfilled by the provision of some training. So even if you put aside the circularity there, fulfilled by the provision of some training. And if you look, in addition, both of these in OBI, you look at training process, which presumably is the training that they're referencing here, a process that achieves a training objective. A loop, right? We want to avoid such things. Does that make sense? Good. In addition to the circularity, we try to avoid, and this one's a little harder to see sometimes, but hopefully you get the insight. Redundancy. We don't want to include redundancy in our definitions. I'll say this with a caveat. Sometimes it's useful to include definition redundancy depending on what you're doing with the definitions. So sometimes when you're doing certain types of embedding or certain types of NLP, it's good to have this additional context. Do that in your application ontology though. You can always expand very easily. But here, the kind of heuristic, don't include redundant expressions like repetitions or paraphrases of expressions of the definitions as part of the definition, like listing examples or explanations of use. We have other annotation properties you can use. We have an annotation property, everybody does, or examples or comments. You can always separate that off, and it's good to. You can like list examples. That's very useful information, but it's not part of the definition as we understand. Some examples. An organism, cellular organism, an organism of microscopic or submicroscopic size, especially a bacterium or protozoan. There's your examples being built in the definition. One reason that you don't want to include such things is because this just cognitively has people sort of anchored to the examples. They're focused on the examples. Now, this will be true with the annotation properties as well. But you should be careful, like definitions are often treated differently. They're treated as like the characterization of the term. And so if you build in specific examples into the definition, it's going to be interpreted as having more value or more importance, or like carving up the domain more than it would if you just put it as an annotation property that says something like example of usage or example. It's about clarity. Definition doesn't mean the same thing as example, and we tend to read definition as different from example, right? Does that make sense? Cellular organism here, an organism of microscopic or submicroscopic size. Examples, a bacterium or protozoa. See, there's a difference. About this patient questionnaire, a questionnaire that comprises a set of questions about a patient, such as height, weight, race, biological sex, clinical history, etc., which will be filled by the human subject. Lots of examples. How about this instead? A questionnaire that comprises a set of demographic and medical questions, which will be filled by the human subject. So there's a move to generality. Instead of listing off the examples, you find the more, what do those examples have in common? You say, that's the thing. Demographic and medical questions, rather than listing off the examples of demographic and medical questions, which itself suggests some kind of closure. What if you have additional demographic information in there? I know you said such as, but people don't read very carefully. Yeah.
I just want to be sure. So on the cellular organism one,
Mhm.
the examples part of that would just be in the annotation.
That's right. It'd be a
Like, it's
separate
not-
annotation. Yeah, we wouldn't be part of the definition here, just like a separate annotation. Yeah, I'm glad they said cellular. You know why. Okay, we also often want to avoid evaluative language. We shouldn't include subjective or evaluative terms because it adds nothing to the descriptive content of the definition. Remember what I say, right? We are in the business of describing. Often we are in the business of describing subject matter expertise, not evaluating subject matter expertise. Even when the SMEs themselves want to evaluate. Now we can rank and order and measure and stuff like that. That's fine. That's different. But you don't want to like build into your definitions evaluations. Certainly, SMEs are sometimes wrong. SMEs are sometimes combative with other SMEs. And it really doesn't, we can get by with just describing what they're talking about. And that's kind of where we want to land here. Cranberry bean, you know, delicious, right? I don't know. I haven't read this definition. We'll see if it's delicious. A shell bean or shell out, blah, 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 blah. The beans inside are cream colored with red streaks and have a delicious nut-like flavor. Huh? Should that be part of the definition? That is delicious. It's beautiful though. Should that be part of the definition? I don't know. I think it's ugly. I have weird aesthetic taste. I also grew up in a trailer park. I bet I don't think it's delicious. I don't like nuts. Does that mean the thing I'm eating is not a cranberry bean? Shouldn't. How about this? A bean that is a large knobby beige pod splotched with red that is cream colored with red streaks and has a nut-like flavor. Putting aside the poetic and aesthetic quality of this definition, less evaluative, right? Like less for me to disagree with on terms of just aesthetic appeal, despite the pseudo alliteration and beautiful syllable count. All right. Does that make sense? So again, just massaging this information in your brain about constructing definitions. Not all definitions that meet that T and E schema are good. We have additional constructs on top of those. Yeah.
So the question I have, the evaluations made by the domain experts are fine though, right? Because my thought was nut-like flavor, sure, what the hell does that mean? Sounds like an evaluation to me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I probably wouldn't want to put nut-like flavor in there unless it was for some food on purpose or something like that. That may be a case, but even there, like that seems like taste is pretty, right?
Right. That's why I was thinking. I was actually thinking of like ontology of wine or something, right? There would necessarily be evaluative criterion, but if it was provided by all the sommeliers and they all said the same damn thing,
then they don't.
do I care?
No, but like this is part of the reason. This is a good point. This is part of the reason I say I want to describe, not prescribe. Like, does everybody agree that cranberry bean is delicious? Is there like a whole industry around gathering data around deliciousness? I mean, maybe if it was like, I don't know, cheeses, whenever we could say they're delicious, because clearly they're delicious. We all agree they're delicious. Nobody disagrees. I mean, there is an industry around it. It's a marketing industry, right? Like Frito or whatever the company is that manufactures it. But no, like we're just describing, if all the sommeliers want to describe it as something as having a nutty flavor. Right. I mean, this is a fact about the way they describe it.
Okay.
Yeah. It may or may not be a fact about, like I would actually describe that as information about the thing rather than the thing itself. And so all that evaluative language would go on the measurement side. So you tell me this is an oaky taste. Your palate is measured. I don't care how many people agree.
Right.
Still information about it.
Okay.
Now, what's the nature of the thing? It may or may not have an oaky taste. generally speaking, whatever that means, if we could get clear on specifying that and we could all agree as a matter of like scientific description that it does have an oaky flavor, then our measurements are accurate.
So if I was working with food chemists who were saying, well, when I add this, people tend to describe it as an oaky.
That's fine,
flavor.
yeah, that's fine.
I got it.
That's fine. There's measurements right there, right?
Right.
We do want to keep the information side separate from the way the world is.
But that wouldn't be part of the definition, though.
No.
Next to or the.
No.
No,
It may, like, it depends on what the metric is. So if you have like a measurement that's like, I'm measuring like a tendency, something like that, then it would be part of the measure. But we have the expressivity to represent all of that information. And so, but what we're not doing is saying something like this beautiful metric, this gorgeous measurement, right? Like you see what I've done here. I've taken the aesthetics and I pulled it out and I've subscribed it to the measurement thing rather than putting the beauty or whatnot, the aesthetic quality that the evaluators, the scientists themselves are measuring. I mean, that's separate.
So like hedging isn't like strictly
Yeah,
promoted.
we simply have to manage. I mean, we live in a world of probability, not possibility. So. Ceteris paribus. Okay, so. Now back to the thread, if you recall, warfare. Early modern warfare, recall, very separate or very distinct from ancient warfare. Early modern warfare characterized by widespread use of gunpowder, explosives, professional armies, and a greater reliance on strategy and intelligence. Not that we didn't have such things back in the day, way back in the day. You know, Hannibal was leveraging intelligence. People leverage intelligence throughout history. They had something of a professional army, although there were a lot of mercenaries. But here we get it on a grand stage, in early modern battles. Also, massive increase in the number of deaths. You can think about it as us becoming quite efficient, much more efficient at killing each other, much more efficient at fighting. It's like UFC rather than boxing. It's a little joke there. Modern warfare also includes these aspects, but it's characterized by weapons of mass destruction, stealth, massive coordination of resources, and expansion of routine operational environments that include things like land, air, sea, and space, as well as the digital domains. Stretched across participating nations, organized in coalitions, as Bush would say, of the willing. Right? Or, you know, axes of evil and powers, like there are groups that get together and say, hey, we all agree, you know, something, Palestine. Yeah. Moving on. This, of course, just reminds you an illustration of the electromagnetic warfare domain and the required coordination among a standard sort of engagement. You see. We got to synchronize information across space, air, land, maritime, and cyber domains. There's an interplay. Information sharing across these domains as well with a central hub. And but it also marks a shift from traditional warfare, which was largely focused on kinetics, buildings, people. Now the damage is focused more on information. But how do we coordinate such massive efforts across disparate domains? This has been a standard challenge in the professionalization of modern warfare. And what it would say, but it's not, it's an old challenge. It's just only in our faces now so much because we've expanded so significantly over many years. But it's as old as like the early civil or the Revolutionary War. Sorry, but the example here I was pointing to last time is this doctrine of massing fires, where you needed to coordinate a bunch of groups together and say, where should we send all our artillery, and so that we don't hit one another? Well, what do? We have a doctrine that we follow, we drill on, we train on, so we all know shoot over there, not over there, not what your intuition says, but what you were trained to do. It required real-time coordination, a common operational perspective, artillery events and actions that were interoperated and working together. But also when it was achieved by information support and strategies like this doctrine that was handed down by von Steuben, and new training and drilling for agents. This is important. It aided professionalization of the armed forces, including signals indicating who can be trusted in battles and whatnot. This is where you get the epaulettes. This is where you get like the signals. This is where you get like ranks and orders, so you know in the heat of battle who you can point to and who you can trust. And of course, this is a great opportunity for red teaming. We see many examples of people from the other side, the adversarial nations, dressing up like your team and saying, go over there. Like confusing, right? But it all trades on this. You're not going to get this kind of professionalization. You're not going to get this kind of concerted effort without something like that. Now, we also need, in addition, this is if we're extending it off to modern warfare, modern conflicts, we need to coordinate intelligence, offense, and defense. Not just the kinetic stuff that we saw with the doctrine of massing fires, but like information sharing, intelligence, what we learn, how do we predict and avoid adversarial conflicts. As we saw with 9/11. It illustrates a challenge that's very similar to the doctrine of massing fires, but on an offensive or defensive side. To predict such events, we need things like real-time information sharing. We need a common operational perspective, interoperability across activities, information support strategies, semantic interoperability across data that we're sharing over the web, and new governance and training. So far, old hat, because we covered a lot of this last time, but again, highlighting this. So real-time info sharing. Agencies need the signal to understand who can be trusted. Just like in military conflict, you have rank order in these agencies too. You know who you can talk to, you know who you should talk to. You also have this like classified environments. You know what you can share. You know you can share certain information. If you have a need to know, then you can go get this, you can go get that. And you shouldn't give it to anybody else or else. Real-time information sharing and revising. Also, common operational perspective. Here was the joint doctrine hierarchy, a bunch of publications that whether you're in the intelligence agencies or not, or in modern warfare, you understand the language that people are using in different environments so that you have a common perspective. So when you issue commands, you can trust that people aren't going to understand what you're saying. This is for humans. A lot of this is open source, of course. You can see these black ones you can't find, but you can find a lot of these, and you can see a lot of them have descriptions of operations, definitions, like a whole slew of definitions that you can reference. And if you're ever confused, if you get some command or something, you don't know, you have a question about what's going on, you can go to these documents. You say that, I assume that's what they mean, right? Because this is the language we use. Interoperability across activities. You hear, in this case, Army doctrine publications, reference publications, field manuals, technique pubs. These are like the grounds for training. These are information that's absorbed by folks in the field, so they understand how to integrate their activities with activities of other agencies. That become very important in modern warfare, where instead of having like battalions or groups that are just solely focused on, say, the marine domain or just focused on the air or something, you have like flexibly trained soldiers that can shift and maneuver and become like something of an air force on the fly or something of like a navy on the fly as the need demands. But you need drilling in a common language and a common operational perspective to pull this off, and this is what has been pursued, at least in the U.S. military, for decades. Of course, anticipating these sorts of things, conflicts or intelligence in general, you need new information support strategies, an operational environment feeding data into information after it's processed, resulting in intelligence, which we've seen time and time again. I just put this here, even though it expands over. This is the intelligence cycle, a little roundabout that takes information, evaluates it, spits out intelligence that can be distributed across the intelligence communities so that we know what to pursue, why, and how. All that again, old hat. So I covered this last time. Now we'll get into some new stuff. Semantic interoperability across data, because you need this too. You need to predict, you need this, and to get that, you need this. So interoperability. What is that? You guys heard of this? It's one of our bugbears, right? So what are we doing to help? Standardization. Standardization, just like with the doctrine of massing fires. Why? So we can train people around a standard and drill so they know how to use it and also know how to integrate their information. What are we doing? We're leveraging basic form ontology and common core ontologies because they're widely used in defense and intelligence industries and mandated, of course. Following specific design principles that will allow us to generate content from the top to the bottom. So there's a semantically integrated picture at the top, and we can generate through this hub and spoke strategy that we adopt pretty regularly, all the way down to the domain. Widely used, 700 plus projects in the open community. ISO standard mandated by the DODIC. You all know this. Important part is the standardization. Like a lot of effort and work has been done to create this as a standard so that people, just like with the joint doctrine, just like with the field manuals, so you have an anchor point around which you can train people. And you need that if you're going to leverage any strategies that are going to be scalable for semantic interoperability across such a massive enterprise. Now, I'm talking about here in the context of like modern warfare, but just any intelligence gathering. You gather so much data all the time. You're going to integrate it. You just need to have anchors like this. I want to give you an example here of how this is applied or has been applied, these sorts of strategies, how they've been applied in actual context, but military context. And here I'm pointing to this joint doctrine ontology project. It was a Kubrick project. The project here was to create a computational counterpart of the DoD Dictionary of Military and Associated Terms, just standard manual that folks use with definitions for, guess what, military and associated terms. Now, it's pretty widely used. It's like the last edition was 2021. They keep updating it. We've seen it before with the definition of intelligence and like joint intelligence. So all those joint publications, that big purple image I was showing you, a lot of the definitions that go into the joint publications are from the DoD dictionary. So widely used. There was a test run using BFO and CCM to create this computational counterpart and to test it in an Air Force research lab, or tested by Air Force Research Lab to support joint operations and to promote interoperability across in a computational way. Because prior to this, people were just saying, hey, if I want to know what you're saying, I'll go look at the DoD dictionary by hand. We can do better, right? As Chris might say, this is like 15th century style. It's 16th century style. It's a bit absurd. And so you could search, like here's a little snippet of the website, DoD and military, dictionary of military terms. You can like search, but you know, searching a dictionary is not the same thing as integrating semantic. But the goal here, enable the identification of logical issues in the DoD dictionary. Dictionaries are created often without too much oversight, and this one's no different. They're just too massive. Like dictionaries are often too big to be able to like spot inconsistencies or issues or troubles. Manual, there's too much information. As more information is coming in, as you have like new teams coming in and adding information, they're not going to have the perspective of the original like people defining terms, and so you need some way to make this computational so you can leverage temporary computing systems to identify the issues without doing it manually. This will also facilitate coordination, better coordination, more consistent coordination. Also increase the automation of plans and operational assessment, blue foil, all this blah, 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 and allow novel assessment processes based on measures of adherence to the doctrine, and with the goal here potentially of being able to give rise to new ways of computationally identifying areas where changes in the doctrine might need to be made. These are like the high level goals of this project. The idea was pretty straightforward. You take the definitions for humans and you create an ontology out of them for machines. That's it. Pretty easy, right? Straightforward. Yeah, easy peasy. Why? Well, you've semantically enriched this dictionary. You've made explicit, implicit connections in the dictionary. The dictionary makes a lot of references to like other definitions, for instance. It's just text. You have to do the work to connect the things manually. If you want to infer information here, just build in that implicit semantics with the hierarchy. We connect parts of hierarchies to other parts of hierarchies. We have object properties, for instance, that allow us to do this. So we can reason over these sorts of connections. So you don't have to just like stare at this late at night as somebody on Ryan tends to do. He like reads the stuff and stares. And yeah, we don't want to do that. Ryan's time is more valuable elsewhere. But
I love it.
I know, right? Oh, it's you, huh? You told me you did this. I love it. Okay, so some issues arose during this project that are issues that are common. Like they're common anytime you're engaging with dictionary. But there are also issues that are common across data sets, across definition schemes that you're going to find in all sorts of other architectures. So it's good to work through them and see what came up in this case. So despite the breadth of coverage, the DoD dictionary did not provide definitions for a lot of commonly used military terms. Like this: commander, nation, organization, territory, training. Yeah, situational awareness is a good one too. We all kind of know what situational awareness means, right? And yet, so here, I want you to pull up the DoD dictionary. I want you to reflect on some of the definitions provided from the DoD dictionary. And I want you to think about the ways in which I've told you to evaluate definitions. And I want you to start just picking at the definition. So pull it up, pick at it, see what's missing. Anything there you expect to see that you don't, anything there that you see that you didn't expect to see, there's a good litmus test. So think about, you've got a term and you've got an expression defining the term. Is it the case that every time you see the term, then the expression defining the term is true? Similarly, is it the case that anytime you see the expression is true, then the term is true as well? But also keep in mind the additional constraints. What's going to, some things are primitive. Are there any circular definitions or seen? Is it legitimately primitive? Could it not be defined in other terms? Is there evaluative language? Etc. You guys feel free to talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to treat Mike and Obi and Ryan as a group. So you go for it. What's up, guys?
We're just seeing if we have the right DoD dictionary, but I hate the word domain, and I was thinking about how to domain is a context that demarcates an area of knowledge. I don't know.
Is that in the 2021?
I'm gonna search the thing right now.
Okay.
Interesting. Special warfare,
Let's see. Yes, well, they have air domain,
Mhm,
domain, subdomain. They don't have just the just a singular definition of domain. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Hmm.
All right.
It's still used, it's just,
I mean, probably like-
they use military.
That's on camera.
I wonder if they use a different name for it. What about context? Do they have context?
Yeah, those guys are scary.
Nope.
Offensive zone, there is a strong-
Offense too? Okay, wait, I'll write it down.
Condition.
Condition? It's interesting. Okay.
So maybe that's because that's something that I think that might make my dirty word list.
Characterization is another one that might make your dirty word list. Some weasel words. I use characterization all the time. Oh, we got stuff in the chat. I didn't see.
Well, I just threw in the military definition of condition, and now I'm thinking about
Got it. Okay.
But I go with the Z. I see that as organization or in a definition.
Activation. Obi's identify activation.
the word activation. Okay.
And even that on its own, it doesn't have that. It's used in activation. It has- we're gonna need it.
Order to act.
Yeah, let me pop over here. Real quick.
And you're on the 2021, 2024. The 2024 one, you're on 2021. How do you find that?
Yeah,
Activation is a good one.
well, I just typed in DoD dictionary 2024.
What do we got? Who wants to share? Ian went down a rabbit hole. I'm curious. What you got, Ian?
So there's a relationship between operation plans,
Uh-huh.
base plan, and concept.
Okay. Concept plan, you said?
Concept.
Okay.
So operation plan is a complete and detailed plan containing a full description of the concept of operations,
Okay,
annexes and time source. Yeah. Concept plan is an operation in abbreviated format. Requires considerable expansion or alteration to convert it into a complete plan.
uh-huh.
Kind of an interesting definition.
Wait, so a concept plan is a type of operation plan,
It is an abbreviated operation.
but an
plan
operation plan is the full picture.
of the concept.
And the concept plan would need to be expanded to give the full picture, but it's a subtype of an operation. That seems like.
And then you have a base plan, which is a type of operation plan that describes the concept of operations.
Uh-huh.
Which of course is sustainment concept and anticipated timeline for implementation.
Huh.
Some weird.
Is it part of? What would you say? Is the third of those options, is that a part of either of the other two?
So base plan and concept plan appear to be, they're trying to define them as subtypes of operation.
Interesting.
It seems like a base plan is exactly an operation plan. It just doesn't have this, all annexes applicable to the plan and a time phase for smooth deployment. So like that part is omitted.
So it seemed like they have the logic backwards then.
A little bit, yeah.
So if it's an operation plan and it has all these like constraints and they're creating subtypes of it and they're dropping off some of the constraints to do so, typically you'll add the constraints.
Exactly, yeah. It would be more
Yeah, because the parent class, all the subclasses inherit properties of the parent. So, all right, well, that seems problematic.
Yeah.
Who else? Yeah, Matthew.
So, I looked at these three definitions that all reference each other: acceptability, adequacy, and feasibility.
Okay.
One, in acceptability, it's the plan review criterion for assessing whether the contemplated course of action is whatever. Contemplated course of action. In feasibility, the plan review criterion for assessing whether the assigned mission can be accomplished using available resources within the time contemplated by the plan. I'm not sure when they become what are they, the ones who believe that everything, the psychic ones, you know what I'm talking about, the people who believe that all things stay. But yeah,
Panpsychists?
yes, panpsychic. Thank you. And then also the problem is that all three of them reference the plan review criterion, but there is not a definition for plan review criterion.
That seems like a problem.
So the problem is they all are plan review criterion, but there is no plan review under which they fall, and therefore there can't be any plan review criterion, because even looking up plan review, they have planning and direction as a process, which says the also intelligence process, but the planning and direction process does not mention criterion at all.
I wonder if that process has embedded in it something like criteria that are specific to given processes, and so they don't want to be too specific about it. I'm not saying this, I'm not defending them, but I'm saying
appropriate intelligence architecture could we cover that?
Yeah, I think that I could see what they're saying. It's not something it's not expressive enough to leverage in a computing environment, but I think I can see what they're trying to get at. Like if you have in mind the intelligence cycle, like it's kind of a broad schema in which there are criteria embedded, but you don't want to be too specific about the criteria because that's going to be dependent on your specific investigations, specific targets and domains. So, but you can give like a high level overview about a criteria, like a criteria for moving through the cycle. And then you could know that there are going to be review criteria without specificity within the cycle, and you can just kind of allude to that. Yeah. But who else? Ray, you had your hand up?
Yeah. So for industrial preparedness, it says the state of preparedness of an industry to produce essential materials to support the national security objectives. Kind of circular.
A little bit. We notice any gaps too? Anything missing?
Yeah. I don't know what they mean by preparedness or industrial. And then what's essential material? I guess that's a question I would have, and I didn't see in the definitions that I read that it describes that at all. There's no reference to objectives.
So yeah, I'm not surprised. So some of these high level terms, you're not going to have a lot of characterization. Some of them are primitive, right? Some of them are going to be primitive, and so
an executive summary.
Now we want to be charitable, right? They may not need them. Some terms are not defined, and they may just not need them. Like it's not come up as a pressing need. Like everybody knows what situational awareness is. It's kind of flexible. It's situational awareness, right? Like as soon as you know what it is, you know what it is, and that's it. So why is it not defined? Well, everybody knows what it is. Of course, we are doing something different. We're trying to be more precise and reflect the implicit semantics for these and make that explicit. So, but I'm always saying this is like we are evaluating but we're evaluating by standards that they themselves are not evaluating or using to evaluate themselves. And so we should be charitable to what they're doing, even if they don't meet our standards. And it's a burden on us, and it's a burden we should take seriously as to why we take it, so why we take these criteria so seriously. So why do we think it's a good idea to spell out all of those definitions? That's a hurdle that we have to overcome. I mean, I think not a hurdle that's insurmountable. I absolutely know why we do it. I just want to put that in your heads. That's a something as burden we have. Nor
This is just me doing my best.
go for it.
Displaced person, they use displaced person in the definition.
Say it. Tell me.
A broad term used to refer to internally and externally displaced persons collectively.
All right. Seems like a problem.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah, we go. Oh, do you have another?
Dislocated civilian does a better job. They define it as a broad term primarily used by the Department of Defense that includes a displaced person, an evacuee, an internally displaced person. I don't know what's the difference between those two. A migrant, a refugee, or a stateless person. So
Okay.
I don't know. It's just I think they could do a better job at these two. Again, I
don't want to weigh in. Ryan's in the call. Yeah, you have.
Supply has the same issue. The circular definition says the procurement, distribution, maintenance while in storage and salvage of supplies, including the determination of kind and quantity of supplies.
It's like the processed product, right?
Yeah.
One is the thing you're supplying, and then they use it. Yeah.
I don't know if that would be a primitive, because it could apply to a lot of different situations, but it doesn't seem like they're just defining it for a function, but not giving actual definition. It also has a producer phase and consumer phase beneath the definition, but it seems to just be like describing a situation where they use it, and it also seems like there would be broader situations where supply would be used.
Right. And again, they might not be interested in the broader context. Like we saw this when we're talking about intelligence, right? They have a specific definition for intelligence that's you. It's like if you're thinking about corporate espionage, that's not going to count. They call it intelligence, and so we don't want to get tripped up on the label, right? If we were spelling out the ontologist preferred label, it'd be something like DoD intelligence or something more specific that might be a subclass of intelligence, broadly speaking. I suspect something similar is going on here. There's like a more specific notion of supply. They don't use that language. They just say supply because in their context, it's background information that they have the implicit, like, yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. Mike, what's up?
So there's a definition for decrypt, and convert encrypted text into its equivalent plain text. So they're using decrypt and encrypt to define. So I think it would be better if they did something like decrypt is to convert information or data code into its equivalent plain text by means of crypto system.
I see. Yeah, the definition here being so they've got decrypt. Which one is theirs?
So the top one is theirs.
To convert.
The bottom one is the conversion to.
Got it. The better one.
Yeah, the better one, of course.
To convert encrypted text into its equivalent plain text by means of a crypto system. And then the preferred is Mike's suggested alternative is to convert information or data code into its equivalent plain text by means of a crypto system. So you changed the difference here being convert information or data code rather than to convert encrypted text. So I think this is a generalization, right? Like they may have this, I think this is right in line with the supply move. So they may have a specific notion of decryption that is focused on converting encrypted text into its equivalent. And then yours would be like a parent class of that. Am I thinking about this correctly? What do you think?
Yeah, I just have a problem when people use the an antonym of a word, decrypt and encrypt, right? I mean, it's just the two sides of the coin.
Did they define encrypt?
I don't know.
Because then that would be,
Text that could be decrypted? No, just.
All right. Yeah, Matthew, we got to move on, but yeah.
Oh, so the last thing that I was looking at, there were two different things. The evaluative terms, they use easily identifiable twice.
Easily identifiable. That's a tricky one.
And then they use the word simple.
Simple.
And then they use favorable and unfavorable definitions. Though that one is also tricky because of how they use it. The only other one was in mission-oriented protective posture here. They start the definition by saying military term for.
Interesting. Okay. Huh. That's a good eye on the evaluative language. Yeah. I'm not sure what to think about the military definition.
Very true.
Yeah, good. Good. Okay. What's one of the lessons we pull out here? Realism, right? And what do I mean by realism? We need an anchor, right? We look at the world. You get a bunch of subject matter experts together, a bunch of agents together. They're talking about the way they use words rather than the way the words should be used or what they mean by the words. And ultimately, they're not going to get to the same place. I ask you what a beach is, and I ask you to define beach. All of you, you're going to give me different definitions. Happens every time I do it. But if we talk about the nature of beaches, you get a little philosophical, not too much, a little philosophical, so that we can all have an anchoring point, which is the world. Then it's much more likely we're going to get to the same place instead of the same place. And then we can derive your different meanings or different uses of the word beach or supply or decrypt based on a common definition that's its parent. We do this with intelligence. We do this with all the ontology terms that we try to construct. Current guidelines for supplementing missing definitions in this doctrine, or at least it was a while back, was to check Webster's. That was the guidance. Of course, there are some questions you might want to ask. Which edition, which of the multiple definitions typically provided in Webster should we be using? How should their inconsistencies be addressed? If you find an inconsistent definition in Webster's, inconsistent that is between Webster's and a DoD dictionary, you use one of the other definitions. What if they're all inconsistent? These questions are outstanding. Missing from both. There's still gaps in both. Situational awareness. At least last I checked, but like cyber situational awareness, explorer, network command and control, integrated situational awareness capability, at least the versions of Webster's that I looked at weren't, they just didn't have this level of war. Yeah, things that you might expect to see. I won't do this because we spent so much time, but the point, if I were to have you run this little experiment to define level of war situational awareness, I suspect we'd run into the same issue. I'd ask you not to use your notes and just come up with your definition. You'd end up defining the terms instead of the nature of the thing, and we'd not get in the same place. Even though we all know what situational awareness is, right? We all know what it is. We all know the word we use to describe, the phrase we use to describe it. We don't actually likely know what it is collectively. You should be able to see from this, and indeed, you should be able to demonstrate, having gone through the class so far, how ontological strategies can address definitional issues. It's one of the reasons why I preface a lot of the classes with identifying definitions and good definitions, give you a litmus test and heuristics. So when you're talking to subject matter experts, you can help identify good definitions when they give them to you or fixed definitions that they give you that aren't good. Also, leveraging mid and top level standards should support optimism. I think about the goals of such a project like bringing the DoD dictionary into a computational environment so it can be searched and checked for logical consistency. We have some standards, some bulwarks, some anchors we can derive from. But there are challenges that are a little deeper than just gaps in the dictionary, bad definitions. There are some issues that we have to address as a community going forward that are a little more worrisome than that. That can be fixed pretty easily, I think. You just need some trained ontologists to go in and take an eye. If we're talking about just semantic interoperability across data, the challenges I have in mind that I want to highlight in these contexts, one is just this. Every agency wants their ontology suite. Three-letter suite. It happens again and again. Various agencies create controlled vocabularies, commonly used language and jargon. Various ontologies are often created specific to that environment. Just like the gene ontology spurred the proliferation of ontologies in an uncoordinated fashion across different areas, and we needed the Obo Foundry to come in and help at least give some standardized efforts so that people were speaking the same language, using the same principles, the same situations going on here. We should expect success in ontologizing content in the military or the intelligence agency or the government more generally to spur the same sort of fruits of success. Every agency wants its own three-letter ontology suite, or at least it's easier to sell your own ontology, your three-letter suite ontology in your own ontology or your own three-letter agency. Think about this. Say you're going about and you're assigning funding opportunities or funding to different projects on the team in your agency, and somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I've got an idea. I want you to fund a project that will connect all of our data ultimately in the future to all the other data sets in other three-letter agencies, some of which we don't have exactly great relationships with, but basically the goal being I want more of like a global integrated data perspective across agencies." And what do you think is going to happen? You're going to get some pushback. You're going to be like, and you can understand some of the reasoning from the funding side. You say, why would I pay for them to do something. You sounds like you're helping them. What's in it for me? And you better have a story about what's in it for you. What's in it for your agency? What's in it for your suite? Or you're not going to overcome that hurdle because that's going to be viewed as a cost. It's a reasonable cost. Like it may be costly to integrate, or at least lower barriers to integration with other groups. Remember that story about the FBI and the CIA and their classification differences? CIA sometimes classifies information at a higher level than the FBI because the FBI will use what they can get their hands on in courts, and then it's public. And so that has in the past burned agents, burned like spies, all in the interest of the FBI's goals in the contrast to the CIA's. So it makes sense that they don't want that information to be spread more widely. Again, I'm not saying that itself is going to get in the way of like interoperability across agencies, but hopefully you can understand some of the motives. And if you may be thinking to yourself, John, reasonable people wouldn't think that. Guess what? That's not the territory we live in. There are crazy people out there. Sorry, they're crazy. Nobody on this call, but crazy people out there with political motivations, strategic goals that will undermine efforts just like this for these sorts of reasons, whether they're rational or not. And unfortunately, I'm not being hyperbolic. Unfortunately, this is just true. Whether reasonable or not, these things get in the way. They're serious blockers. And you have folks at high levels who can just sign a piece of paper and say, I don't want this for these bad reasons. And people just have to do what they say. So we want to minimize the kind of barrier to entry here. We want to minimize such issues. Of course, we do have this foundry effort going on across the DoD and IC. This is good. You saw the mandate and everything, and that's alleviating some of the bottlenecks here. There's more work to do, but there's some reason to be optimistic. I just want to put it on your radar. More challenges. An adequate account of characterizing military entities requires at minimum, I think, ontological representations of a whole host of content, social dispositions. What did I say when I was talking about standardization of effort? This is bigger than just the DoD dictionary and bigger than just the joint publications. But even if you're looking at that, you're going to see representations of all these groups, right? Social dispositions, customs, jargon, conventions, speech acts, imperatives, interrogatives, commands, credences, mental functioning, beliefs and knowledge and whatnot, as well as social acts like intelligence gathering, as we've been discussing in class. Documents like the specific rankings, intelligence reports, and manuals used to drill people. Authorities like agencies and squad leads and SMEs and all that. Digitization of digitals like encryption, just as we were talking about a moment ago, sensor communication and the sensors themselves, hardware like those weapons and facilities and towers. We need it all. It's a complex modern warfare environment. We need it all if we want to leverage it all. And what do? We make explicit that implicit semantics and all the information that we have about this worldview. That's a challenge because we don't have most of this. We don't have the social disposition stuff or the social act stuff very well spelled out. We have some work, first steps on speech acts, documents, and digital work. You got C3O, the cyber ontology work. You got DX, so Shane Babcock actually put together this very interesting rank ontology for the military. And I've worked on this arguments ontology. So we've got some aspects of this as first steps. And we have better work on, in the green here, you see the mental functioning ontology. It's got representations of beliefs and knowledge. Authorities, we have Common Core, has quite a somewhat, maybe first steps, maybe that should be blue, but it has representations you can extend pretty easily to represent things like squad leads and SMEs. And we have representation of hardware, et cetera. They're actually pretty big functions, cat class and like artifacts class and CCO that can get you far in that area. But there's a lot of content that we don't have, more content we don't have than we do have. And so we need to spell this out if we want a full picture of the military domain, especially in the context of modern warfare. You see the pressure? You see what I'm saying? This is a challenge. And guess how many ontologists we have to work on this? There's a training gap, which leads me to this section. Governance and training, both humans and machines. Remember, what are we trying to do? We're trying to predict mass fires, predicts intelligence concern. We're trying to do the predictive analytics or set ourselves up so that we can predict concerns or worries, issues that come on in the future in this new modern warfare scheme. So we need to train ourselves, humans and machines, to be better at leveraging what we have if we're going to do that kind of prediction. This should not be surprising. I've just given you some examples here of stuff that I've been doing to help train you. You know, you're in this class. It's not news. We got an applied ontology education hub on GitHub. We have some certificate work going on. And then you have Barry's decades-long courses over in this open access resource on the in-core page with videos and videos and videos of this work where he's training people over the years to do this sort of competent work in applied ontology in these domains of building ontologies and applying ontologies as we've been doing. So we have been making steps to working on this training aspect, drilling aspect. And of course, you are here doing that as well. Nevertheless, Big challenge. Why? It's not just a challenge on the number of people we have. It's not just a challenge on how we're training or what we're training. The foundations of our field are not as well developed as you might think. Everybody's in the game now. Go on LinkedIn. You saw I posted on the job forum in the Slack. I said I'll post a job here and there when it comes up. The other day I just posted, just go look on LinkedIn and search ontology. I can't copy and paste it all, right? Like it's on fire. People are I keep thinking it's going to ebb down or something, but it keeps ramping up. I saw a post yesterday talking about how ontology was the word of the year for 2024. I'm not surprised. It's on everybody's lips. But if you're also on LinkedIn or if you're also in these communities, you'll find that when we start talking to people in nearby or adjacent fields about what we're doing, semantic interoperability, ontologies, data models, they think they're doing that too. They often think they're doing the same thing. And we don't often have good stories to explain to them how what we're doing is different. So it's not just about training people. It's not just even about maturing the training. We also need to establish or evaluate the foundations of our field, our terminology. What is an ontology? What exactly is it that makes ontology engineering unique? What is it? So, and if we don't, here's what we run into. Swim lanes. This is NIEM, National Information Exchange. Well, I forget what the M stands for, but whatever. But this is a snapshot of their homepage. You see, look at this beautiful story they're giving. NIEM enables a common understanding. And look, if I say vessel and you say boat and he says ship and she says conveyance, we mean the same thing. What they do is fine for information exchange standards for messaging. That's fine. They should stay in their swim lanes. Here's an example. This is from Barry. So here's how you would represent an NIEM. John lost his car registration documents and was required to report to the DMV within 7 days. Metadata, text string. Not making explicit the implicit semantics, just dropping it down in a text string. Again, that's fine. If you're just exchanging information, that's fine. It would be a lot easier if we had a firmer establishing of what we were doing and made it very clear to them and everyone else where the swim lanes were. Now, I just want to highlight they're not talking about meaning or understanding or consistent meaning. They regularly leverage attempts to create ontologies in their communities. So like 5.2 in 2022 is a new meta model of NIEM that allows the creation of an ontology using OWL and RDF. They think converting it into OWL and RDF means it's an ontology. That aside, just in the point of swim lanes, you should seriously, as an ontology engineer, seriously ask yourself what distinguishes ontology engineering from taxonomies, concept maps, data models. What does distinguish what we do from data models? Coding, database management, machine learning. I'm gonna let you think about this stuff, but you should know the answers. I'm done. You guys sufficiently frightened? Do you feel the responsibility? You could. You feel the responsibility. Sometimes that manifests as fear, but you should feel the responsibility. We are. Hold on. I got more. And now I'm going to get on my pedestal for a second. But look, it is a responsibility, and you should feel emboldened. You're part of creating a science. It's not an accident. It's born out of philosophy. Philosophy is a path on the wheel. Science is born out of it. And how does that work? Psychology used to be in the philosophy department. Physics used to be in the philosophy department. What happened? There was a consensus agreed on. People agreed finally on how to answer, or like metrics for how to answer questions that they were interested in that field. And once you do that, it becomes a science. It starts becoming a science. And we are becoming a science. Ontology engineering becoming a science, and you're here for that. And with responsibility. We need to be clear about what our foundations so that we can do that and we have reasons, good justified reasons for distinguishing what we're doing from what they're doing. And that is on all of us right now. That to me, that's invigorating. I'm excited. We're creating new science. How many times in your life how many times in the lives of people do you think that you've ever got to say that and be correct about it? You're correct about it. So with that, go forth and let's make a science.